Hello, Westminster. My name is Boyd Taylor. I'm here again to talk about the fall edition of the Westminster Writers Journal and visit with one of the contributors. As you know, the Writers Journal is a platform for the creative expression, whether poetry, nonfiction, memoirs, or fiction by Westminster residents. Copies of the spring edition are still available in the little store if you missed out on getting yours. And the fall edition with 45 resident contributors will be arriving in mid-November, Amazon willing. We've received the proof copies, and it's quite a handsome volume. I think you'll be pleased with it. My guest today is one of those 45 writers, Dr. William Schleuse, who with his wife, Virginia McDermott, moved to Westminster, I believe in 2013 or thereabouts, when the connection between the Preston and the Windsor building was completed. Bill is a native of Austin and San Antonio and a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin and the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. He practiced and taught psychiatry and psychoanalysis in Houston. Did I say psychiatry? I think I did. And psychoanalysis in Houston and Austin for more than 40 years. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Boyd.
How are you and Virginia getting along in the time of the pandemic?
Well, we're doing it pretty well, all things considered, missing a few things, of course, but between programming on 1890 and outside programming, and I'm doing a lot of online classes, we're coping pretty well, I think.
Well,
we're lucky to be here.
We feel fortunate to be here. We have a great staff, and I think they're doing everything that they can to keep us safe and to take care of us.
Absolutely. And successfully, all things considered.
I think it has been a success, yes. So many of us saw your talk, Westminster Residents Present, Monday night a few weeks back on sleep. It was very interesting. For those who didn't see it, it's clear that sleep is very important to our emotional well-being.
Absolutely. And incidentally, we will be doing another program on sleep. We'll call it Sleep 2.0. I understand won't be broadcast till after the first of the year, but I'm confident the technical quality will be vastly better than the first, which, by the way, I believe was the very first Westminster Presents that was recorded, and they were still on a learning curve. So
yes, you were the guinea pig. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I was not the first broadcast, but
yeah,
for some reason I was the first. And part of the problem was we were trying to use the PA system as well as recording directly, and we were trying to include both the speaker and the PowerPoint, which just didn't work for reasons I won't bore you with.
Well, we're learning as we go here, and the quality of the programs from a technical standpoint have gotten considerably better, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll look forward to phase 2 or installment 2 of your presentation. I understand that you have another presentation for the residents, for Westminster Residents Present on emotional well-being in the time of COVID. Tell us about that.
Right. We'll be recording that next week, and I believe it's going to be shown on November 9th. And I hope it'll be good. It definitely will be timely.
Yes, I think none of us really expected, maybe you did, maybe you knew, but I never expected that we would be locked down this long. And so it has its emotional difficulties for everybody, I'm sure.
It certainly requires some adaptation, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, keeping busy is one of them, and you certainly, I guess, and you certainly take advantage of that. People are familiar with your your interest in photography and have heard your lectures on the history of photography as a medium. Tell me how that particular interest of yours came into being.
Well, it evolved sort of organically. I didn't start photographing halfway seriously until I was close to 50. And, you know, after 15, 20 years of that, you learn incidentally some history. And I kind of decided to look into it and study it more systematically. And that was about 10, 12 years ago. And I'm still enjoying it. And I've now backed into art history as well a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating history, and you've explained the origins very well, and it's still an evolving medium. The technology and the changes in the capabilities of that technology, and translating that into really an art form is evolving rapidly.
Yeah, I've been particularly interested since I've started dabbling in art history in the way photography, at least some photographers were trying to be artists back in the 19th century. And, but it was really only into the 20th century that it started becoming accepted, at least some photography was accepted as an art. Susan Sontag's comment was, photography is not art. It's a medium out of which many things, including art, can be made. Or close quote.
I guess that's true about. Well, I won't say. I know that the Blanton has a collection of photographs by artists who that they display occasionally.
They do, and of course, the Harry Ransom Center has a world-class, very, very important collection, the Gernsheim collection, which is based on a huge collection of mostly late 19th, early 20th century European photography that Gernsheim collected and sold to the Ransom at a good price.
Who was he?
He was an English, well, he worked in England. Gernsheim obviously was from the continent, but originally the name. But he and his wife, he was a photographer, but really more of a historian and collector, and did a very systematic collection over about a 10-year period when nobody else was doing it. So he got a lot of stuff, including the world's first photograph, which is on display permanently at the Ransom.
And, the world's first photograph.
Yeah.
Wow. What was the subject?
Not much to look at, but it's historically extremely important.
They let you see it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's in its own little cubicle right next to their copy of the I'm blocking on the name, the Bible. First printed version of the Bible.
Yeah.
Which there are about
Gutenberg.
500 copies.
Not Guggenheim. Okay. Well, thank you. Our viewers may not know that you also have that you're a long-time dedicated sailor. Tell us about your interest in sailing.
Oh my. Well, it's a lifetime interest. I suppose started being realized in college when I bought a quarter of interest in an old broken down Lightning class sailboat on Lake Travis. And it sort of built from there. I've owned about a dozen boats altogether, both power and sail, and just sold what I'm fairly confident was my last boat 2 years ago that I kept in Upper Galveston Bay.
You're fairly confident that's your last boat.
Fairly confident. I never say never.
That's right. So you have any memorable voyages you might tell us about?
Well, yeah. too many to include. That I'll try to mention two. One was a offshore race that I crewed on offshore racing. I raced one designs in the bay myself mostly, but this was on a one design on a cruising boat racing from Galveston to Gulfport, Mississippi, close to Biloxi. And we'd had good breezes for a couple of days, and then we were becalmed as we were just approaching the Mississippi Delta. And somebody turned on the radio, and we discovered that the 5-day war was 3 days old. And despite being becalmed, we ended up winning our class in that race. I was watch captain on that one.
Yeah.
The other is after I retired, excuse me, I commissioned a blue water powerboat on the West Coast. Ended up not keeping it as long as I'd planned, but met some wonderful people and cruised with them for 6-7 years, 2 or 3 weeks at a time, 2 or 3 times a year, and covered the whole West Coast from Zihuatanejo, Mexico to the Glacier Bay. So a lot of good stories out of that.
Well, it sounds like you you were quite a sailor. So Lake Travis must seem fairly calm in the distant past now compared to sailing in the open sea.
Yeah, lake sailors, racing sailors really learn to cope with light, shifty winds.
Yeah.
Bay sailers, especially in Galveston Bay and San Francisco Bay, learn to handle breezy and Galveston Bay very choppy waters.
Yeah. They're all different. So your story in this edition, you remember, is a story of a friendship between you as a young boy and an old gentleman, Mr. Durham, or at least he seemed it seemed old to you at the time, who lived across 31st and a half Street from you here in Austin.
Right.
You were what, 6 or 7 years old at the time?
Well, actually a little younger than that to begin with. The active friendship probably started almost before I remembered, maybe 3. And the most active part of it was from then until we moved to Shoalcrest Boulevard, and shortly after the Durhams moved to a property off of Highway 31, just south of town, actually at the intersection of Manchac Road.
So it must have made quite an impression on you as that young.
Very much so.
And I wonder if you'd share a selection from your story for us,
Sure.
or two.
Let me see if we can see it. Let me show you a blown up photograph that sort of says it all in.
Oh, there the two of you are.
Yeah, there's Mr. Durham and me hugging his leg.
So you were about 3 or 4 there, it looks like.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
Where's that taken?
That's taken on 31st and a half Street. The house is not mine. Actually, there were 3 or 4 little rent houses that occupied the corner next to ours, and I believe that's the background.
Yeah.
But it was a very important experience in my life, needless to say.
Yeah.
So I'll read a little bit from it.
Thank you.
He always referred to himself as Durham with me, so that's what he always had been. I'd almost forgotten my parents suggesting I call him Mr. Durham. He'd say, "Durham's going out in the country. Would Billy like to come along?" He was the old man who lived across the street from us on 31st and a half Street, and he was very important in my life from before I could remember till after we moved to Shoalcrest Avenue, just before I started 2nd grade at Woolridge Elementary. Durham was probably at least 60, bald with a rim of white hair and sun-parched skin from lots of time outdoors. He seemed very old to me, and he was like the perfect grandfather, though I didn't think of him that way at the time. He was a land agent and broker and had an office in the old Littlefield building. Durham took me to his office some, but most trips were out in the country. I suppose he must have been collecting rents or dealing with problems. Often he'd introduce me to the tenant, always as his partner, but sometimes he had me wait in the car out of earshot. Sometimes there would be a couple of bamboo fishing poles tied to the car. That meant that after Durham's business was done, more often than not, we'd stop at some pond or stream, baiting our hooks with worms from a bucket in the trunk. We'd usually catch a few perch, sometimes a catfish. It took me a while to realize that some of the fish I caught had been secretly put on my hook by Durham. I don't remember how I figured that out, but he was delighted when I caught on and told me that I was smart. One time I asked about where the worms came from, and as soon as we got home, Durham showed me how to dig for earthworms, and I was amazed to learn that fishing worms were available in almost any backyard. I learned lots of amazing things like that from Durham.
Very nice. That's very nice, Bill. Thank you very much. I appreciate the conclusion of your story, where you reflect on how possibly your relationship as a child with this older gentleman, Mr. Durham, may have been a two-way street. But we'll leave that for the readers to discover for themselves when they open the fall edition of the Writer's Journal 2-year piece. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for sharing it with the viewers in the Writer's Journal.
You're very welcome. Enjoyed being with you.
And now to all of you watching out there, the Writer's Journal fall edition will be here in a matter of weeks, and we'll keep you advised. They'll make wonderful gifts for holiday season. And so this is Boyd Taylor saying thanks again to you, Bill, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Stay safe and stay well.